Hello, thanks for joining me today. Our story is God Will Never, Never Break His Promise, based on Genesis 22. How might Isaac have explained to his young sons, Jacob and Esau, why God had commanded his father Abraham to offer him as a burnt offering? 8-year-old Esau sat on his bed mat firing imaginary arrows in the dark at his younger brother Jacob, who could hear him shooting his sound with every shot, and they were hitting the target. Esau, stop! I said stop! Stop! Jacob's protest aimed at his father's ears, and they too were hitting the mark. Soon the familiar scraping footsteps approached the tent. Esau lay down quickly, pretending to sleep. Father Isaac swept the flap aside and firmly said, "Sons of mine, that's enough. You're disturbing the whole camp. It's late. Go to sleep." "Father, tell Esau to stop shooting me," complained Jacob. "You have a shield, Jacob. It's called ignoring him. Use it." "He's just doing it to make me mad." "Yes, and you're rewarding his behavior," Isaac said. "Esau?" Only silence. "Don't pretend you're sleeping, son. Answer me." "Yes, Father," Esau answered. "Now stop." Isaac couldn't help letting out a little chuckle. "Stop shooting your brother." There was giggle in the darkness. "Yes, Father," said Esau. "Father?" Jacob asked. "Yes, my son." "Was Grandfather Abraham really going to stab you with the knife?" The boy had been pondering the strange, disturbing story his father had told him the previous night. Isaac walked in and knelt between the boys. He would have if God wanted him to. "Did God really want him to?" asked Jacob. "That's a good question," replied Isaac. "What God really wanted was for Father Abraham to trust him, even if it meant sacrificing me." "Did you know Grandfather Abraham was going to sacrifice you?" "No. I noticed we didn't have a lamb, but when I asked him about it, he said, 'God will provide himself a lamb.'" Genesis 22:8. It was quiet for a moment, and then Jacob asked, "Did that mean you were the lamb?" "Well, it looked like I was going to be the lamb. But the main thing is that Father Abraham trusted that God would provide the lamb, and he was willing for me to be that lamb if that's what God required." "But if you had died, Esau and I wouldn't have been born." Isaac paused thoughtfully. "I don't think that's true, Jacob, because God had promised to Father Abraham. Do you remember? God said, 'Through Isaac shall your offspring be named.'" When God makes a promise, he never breaks it. That means he knew I would grow up and have offspring, and that you two scoundrels would be my offspring. "But if you died, you couldn't have offspring," Jacob objected. "I know it sounds strange, son. Here's how Father Abraham explained it to me. He believed so strongly that God would keep his promise that even if God was asking him to sacrifice me, then God must have planned to bring me back to life from the dead." Esau interjected, "Like a ghost?" "No, not like a ghost. God would have healed me and made me alive again, just like I am now." Jacob continued, "But he didn't do that. God made a ram get caught in the bushes." "That's right," said Isaac. "God provided a sacrifice just like he promised. And it wasn't me. God be praised." "But why did God tell Grandfather Abraham to make you a sacrifice if he really knew he was going to provide the ram?" asked Jacob perceptively. "Well, I don't know all God's reasons, son. He always has more reasons than he tells us. But remember what I told you last night. After Father Abraham offered me, God said to him, 'By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand that is on the seashore, and your offspring shall possess the gates of the enemies, and in your offspring shall all nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice.'" Genesis 22:16-18. "So Jacob, you tell me, Why did God tell Father Abraham to offer me as a sacrifice? Jacob thought for a moment. To see if grandfather would obey him? Yes, that's very good. But it was also to show us, me and you and Esau and your children someday, what it meant to trust God. Father Abraham trusted God so much that he was willing to even sacrifice the fulfillment of God's promise, me, because he believed that God would still fulfill his promise. I want you to understand this, because the promise God made to Father Abraham, he's also making to you. In your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Someday you're going to have to trust that God will keep his promise, even when it looks like he won't. When that happens, remember Father Abraham and say with him, the Lord will provide. Does that make sense? Yes, Father, said Jacob. Now, the Lord wants to provide for you tonight is a good night's sleep. So let's have it. Quiet. Two tired voices responded, Yes, Father. And as soon as Isaac's footsteps faded away, Jacob heard an irritating sound in the dark. As Abraham walked toward Mount Moriah with Isaac, he must have felt deeply conflicted and heartbroken beyond words. He didn't understand all that God was doing. He didn't know he was providing an illustration of justification by faith for God's people for all time, James 2:21-23. He didn't know this act would foreshadow the sacrifice of God's only Son, a Son who would not be spared because he was the provided lamb, John 1:29. Abraham only knew that God knew what he was doing and that God would be trusted to keep his promise, even if it appeared like the promise was going to die, Hebrews 11:19. And God proved himself faithful to Abraham. God will prove himself faithful to you as well. Even if it doesn't look like it right now, God has his reasons, and they are more than you know. So trust him. Thank you for coming today, and we'll see you again.